People don't believe he went to bed hungry, got up hungry, went and worked all day, come in, nothing to eat. He'd get out hunting and stuff to kill squirrels and rabbits for us to have something to eat, and we were always proud of him. Daddy got up one cold, snowy night and put on his clothes and walked off and left us. My mother was down sick. I seen him when he left out the door. I don't know where he went, and when he found out Mama died, he didn't come back.
Audie Murphy truly hated him, and the real reason went way deeper than jealousy. March 6, 1980, Washington, D.C. Just 3 months after John Wayne died, his family walked into the Capitol building. Congress handed them a gold medal. 3 words were carved into it: John Wayne, American, not actor, not movie star. Just that. Now jump back to May 1971. A small plane crashed into a mountain in Virginia, killing everyone on board. One of them was Audie Murphy, the most decorated American combat soldier of World War II. At just 20 years old, he earned the Medal of Honor after taking down or wounding 50 enemy soldiers in one brutal hour. Murphy came home with 33 medals, including every combat award the U.S. Army offered. But Congress never voted him a medal. No airport carried his name, no giant statue stood for him. He was buried at Arlington under the same plain white headstone as thousands of other soldiers. His widow reportedly struggled to afford travel for all their children to attend the funeral. And for years, Murphy carried a cold resentment toward one man in Hollywood, John Wayne. It was not about fame. It was tied to a movie, a war America wanted to ignore, and one explosive year, 1968. That was when these two men became complete opposites in the eyes of the country, and most people were never told the full story. Before going further, picture both men clearly. A lot of people grew up watching John Wayne every weekend, but Audie Murphy lived a very different reality. Some people have never even heard of Audie Murphy, but by the end of this, you'll understand exactly why his story still hits hard today. Start with the man most people remember. John Wayne was born Marion Robert Morrison in Iowa in 1907. After his family lost their farm, they moved to California while he was still a kid. He was tall, athletic, and played football at USC until a shoulder injury destroyed both his scholarship and sports future.
He just couldn't get over it, and so he came in one day and he told my oldest sister, Corrine, he said, I want to join the Army. And she said, Audie, you're not old enough. And he said, I know it, but I want to go. He said, will you sign for me? She said, well, you know, I can, but if something happens to you, I'll always feel guilty. She said, I'm going to go over there and do my best. And he said, if I live through it, I'm going to get a home where these 3 little ones here will have home. He walked over there and signed up, and he's just gone in a day or 2.
After that, he worked at movie studios carrying props, then landed small acting roles. Everything changed in 1939 when director John Ford cast him in Stagecoach. That's when America got its cowboy star. Wayne went on to make more than 170 films. He played war heroes, sheriffs, ranchers, and tough military men for decades. In 1969, he won an Oscar for True Grit. To millions of Americans, John Wayne became the image of strength and patriotism itself. Now, here's the man many people overlooked. Audie Murphy was born in Texas in 1925. His father left the family, and his mother died when he was just 16. He had 11 brothers and sisters, and with no money or support, many of them ended up in orphanages or foster homes. Murphy was tiny compared to most soldiers, around 110 pounds when he tried joining after Pearl Harbor. The Marines rejected him. The paratroopers rejected him too. Eventually, the Army accepted him, and he even lied about his age just to get in. He spent the next 3 years fighting in Europe. By the time Audie Murphy came home, he was only 20 years old. He had been wounded several times, lost nearly every soldier he trained with, and struggled badly after the war. He reportedly slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow for years. Both boys grew up poor. One played soldiers on movie sets. The other survived real combat in freezing fields across France. America rewarded both men, but not in the same way. Now, this story gets twisted online all the time. People simplify it into John Wayne was a coward and Audie Murphy hated him for it. But the truth is more complicated than that. When World War II started, John Wayne was already 34 years old with 4 young children. He received a draft deferment, just like many other fathers supporting families at the time. He also reportedly tried joining the Navy, but was rejected because of age and an old football injury. At the same time, Republic Pictures wanted to keep him in Hollywood. Studios believed famous actors helped boost morale during the war, and Wayne had become one of those faces America recognized everywhere. That part is real too, so this is not really about cowardice. It's about the kind of country America became after 1945. The nation needed 2 different images of strength. It needed real soldiers carrying trauma, scars, and memories they could never escape, but it also wanted clean-cut heroes on movie screens, men who looked fearless and easy to celebrate. John Wayne became the symbol people watched, Audie. Murphy became the reality many people preferred not to talk about. Audie Murphy did not resent John Wayne just because Wayne stayed home during the war. It went deeper than that. He hated what Wayne represented in America. To Murphy, the country seemed more comfortable celebrating a movie image of war than facing the real men who survived it. The Hollywood version made millions, while many veterans came home carrying trauma, injuries, and struggles nobody wanted to see. When Murphy walked into a room full of veterans, they treated him like family. But in Hollywood, he often felt more like a product than a person. By 1968, that divide became impossible to ignore. One man was filming a Pentagon-supported war movie.
3 days later, we were in an orphanage with a lot of kids and stuff, and maybe that helped us. It was sad, but when you get out with a bunch of kids playing ball and stuff, you forget stuff like that. I told my little sister, and I said, the war will be over one of these days, and Audie will be home. And I said, we'll have a home again. I never did doubt that he would come back alive. I just knew that he had the guts to keep his word. He was the man of his word all the way.
While the other was dealing with financial problems and personal battles behind the scenes. But to understand why Murphy carried that anger, you have to look at the life he had before fame or war ever found him. Audie Leon Murphy grew up in deep poverty in Texas. As a kid, he picked cotton in the fields around Kingston just to help his family survive. By 12 years old, he hunted rabbits and squirrels because food was never guaranteed. He once explained that missing a shot meant the family might not eat that day. That kind of poverty was harsh and constant. Thin clothes, empty kitchens, long days of work. His mother was the one stable person in his life. And when she died in 1941, Murphy was only 16 years old. Standing at her grave, he made a promise that would shape everything that came next. He promised himself he would make his mother proud somehow. Not long after, he tried joining the military. The Marines rejected him for being too small. The paratroopers did too. Finally, in 1942, the army accepted him. He looked so young that his sergeant reportedly gave him the nickname Baby. Murphy was sent through North Africa, Sicily, Italy, and eventually France. But one moment changed his life forever. January 26, 1945, near Holtzwihr, France. His unit was under heavy German attack, and most of the soldiers around him were already dead or wounded. Their position was collapsing fast. Murphy ordered the remaining men to fall back while he stayed behind alone. He climbed onto a burning American tank destroyer that had already been knocked out earlier that day. Flames were still shooting from the vehicle, and it could explode at any second. Still, Murphy grabbed the mounted machine gun and opened fire toward the advancing German forces. For nearly an hour, he held them back by himself. Enemy soldiers reportedly got within yards of him. He was hit in the leg but refused to stop firing. By the end of the battle, around 50 German soldiers had been killed or wounded, and the attack was stopped. Murphy was just 19 years old. For those actions, he received the Medal of Honor, the military's highest award. When he returned home in 1945, America turned him into a national hero. He appeared on magazine covers, at parades, and in newspapers everywhere. Life magazine even put his face on the cover. He was only 20 years old and already struggling badly behind the scenes. Years later, Murphy was asked what he remembered from that burning tank destroyer. His answer was chilling. He said he was so exhausted that he no longer cared whether he survived. He just kept firing because it was the only thing left to do. Hollywood saw Audie Murphy's magazine covers and instantly saw money. That was the moment a whole new struggle started for him. Now, flip the story around. While Murphy was fighting in Europe, John Wayne was already one of Hollywood's biggest stars. By the time Pearl Harbor happened, Wayne was 34 years old, with a wife, 4 children, and a major contract with Republic Pictures. The studio depended heavily on him to make money. After America entered World War II, Wayne reportedly tried more than once to enlist. The Navy declined him, partly because of age and an old football injury. There were also discussions about joining wartime intelligence work, but nothing came from it. Some reports claim the studio pressured him to stay in Hollywood because they feared losing their top star. Others argue Wayne stayed because his family relied on his income. Historians still debate the exact reason, but one thing is clear. While actors like Jimmy Stewart, Henry Fonda, Clark Gable, and Tyrone Power entered military service,
in later life, he didn't, he lost his patience with that. But that didn't stop him making great pictures.
Mm-hmm. Did he change at all then stylistically over the years?
No, I don't think so. And he was a man who he took whatever assignment, you know, if you happen to catch him at the right time, you take an assignment that there's a bigger challenge maybe than it's possible to make it.
John Wayne remained in Hollywood making war films, and he made a lot of them. Flying Tigers, The Fighting Seabees, Back to Bataan, They Were Expendable, Sands of Iwo Jima. Movie after movie, Wayne played fearless military heroes. Pilots, Marines, sailors, fighters. He charged into battle, gave dramatic speeches, and won wars on screen. At the same time, Audie Murphy was fighting real battles in freezing conditions across Europe. One man was surviving combat, the other was helping create America's image of combat. And that difference mattered more than people realized. Audiences packed theaters during the war, watching John Wayne storm enemy positions on giant screens. For many Americans, those movies became the version of war they remembered most. It worked, and that's what made John Wayne so valuable to Hollywood. Studios realized early that he was more than just an actor. He became the kind of war hero audiences could safely watch from theater seats. On screen, he could charge into battle, die heroically, and come back again in the next movie. The pain looked real, but it was still performance. The blood washed off after filming ended. For many Americans, Wayne became the image placed over the reality of war itself, and deep down, Wayne seemed to understand that pressure. After World War II, many of his roles started changing. His characters became tougher, colder, and more isolated. In films like The Searchers, Red River, and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, he often played men who struggled to fit back into society. These were not simple heroes anymore. They were damaged men carrying heavy reputations and painful histories. Wayne understood that image had power, but by then he was trapped inside it too. And when Audie Murphy finally arrived in Hollywood after the war, that image was already everywhere. The movie industry had already built its version of the American soldier. Murphy came to Hollywood in 1945 at only 20 years old. He had no acting background, no experience in the business, and no connections besides one important supporter, actor James Cagney. After seeing Murphy on the cover of Life magazine, Cagney reportedly said, "That boy ought to be in pictures." Cagney helped bring him to California, but the transition was rough. Murphy reportedly slept on a cot in a gym for months while trying to break into the industry. He was quiet, nervous, and uncomfortable around people. Studio executives looked at him and struggled to figure out how to market him. And post-war Hollywood really was a machine. It mass-produced stars, heroes, and stories for audiences hungry to feel proud, inspired, and entertained after years of war. Back then, movie studios controlled actors like factories controlled workers. Every actor had a role to fill, and the studio decided exactly what kind of image they would sell to the public. So, when Audie Murphy arrived at Universal Pictures, executives saw a problem immediately. Hollywood already had its big war stars, John Wayne, Robert Mitchum, Gregory Peck, tall men with deep voices and classic tough guy looks. That was the image audiences expected from military heroes. Murphy looked nothing like that. He was small, thin, and young-looking. He spoke softly, avoided eye contact, and reportedly reacted badly to sudden loud noises on set. Sometimes he looked distracted, almost like his mind was somewhere else entirely. The truth was uncomfortable for Hollywood. The real war hero did not match the version they had been selling on screen. He looked more like a kid who had seen too much too early. Universal still signed him, but mostly pushed him into low-budget westerns, cheap Saturday matinee movies that filled small-town theaters for loose change. Murphy usually played quiet good guys with fast draw skills and simple storylines. The studio never treated him like a major star. They did not invest heavily in training him or pairing him with top directors. He worked constantly, making 44 films during his career, but most of them faded from public memory. That was the difference between Audie Murphy and John Wayne. Murphy was a working actor. Wayne was a cultural icon. Years later, Murphy shared a story that stuck with a lot of people. He said that after spending years on studio sets, he realized almost nobody in Hollywood had ever seriously asked him about the war. They knew he had earned the Medal of Honor. They used his military history in promotions and newspaper ads. His combat record helped sell tickets, but behind the scenes, many people never seemed interested in the real experiences behind it. That realization hit him hard. To the industry, he often felt less like a veteran and more like a marketing image printed on posters. The real man behind Audie Murphy's fame often felt invisible. Hollywood could sell the image of a war hero, but it struggled to deal with the emotional damage war left behind. And that leads to one of the biggest turning points in Murphy's career. In 1951, Murphy made the only major film of his career centered on an actual soldier instead of a cowboy. The movie was The Red Badge of Courage, directed by legendary filmmaker John Huston. Huston was not interested in fake Hollywood war stories. He had directed classics like The Maltese Falcon and The Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
what he said he meant. He came through it, and they gave him parades and stuff. They gave him bonds. They gave him money. And he took that money and bought a big 2-story house. And he told my oldest sister, he said, if you and your husband will take those kids and bring them and raise them with your 2 boys, I'll give you that house. So that's what he did.
But he had also served during World War II and filmed documentaries about combat exhaustion and psychological trauma. Some of that footage was reportedly considered too disturbing for wide release at the time. He understood real fear, real combat, real emotional scars. That's why he chose Audie Murphy for the lead role. The story followed a young Civil War soldier who panics during battle, runs away in fear, then later returns to fight. It was not a story about a perfect hero. It was about confusion, survival, guilt, and fear. Huston believed Murphy could bring something painfully real to the role because he had already lived through those emotions himself. According to people involved with the production, Murphy barely had to perform certain scenes. He simply tapped into memories he already carried. Early footage reportedly stunned people on set. There were scenes where Murphy looked terrified, exhausted, and emotionally distant in ways that felt almost too personal to watch. Critics who viewed early cuts described the movie as haunting and unusually honest compared to most American war films at the time. But MGM executives hated what they saw. The studio expected something exciting and heroic. Instead, Huston delivered a slow, emotional story about fear and survival. The lead character spent parts of the film frightened, confused, and isolated instead of acting like a fearless action hero. To the studio, that was a problem. They did not see a crowd-pleasing war movie. They saw something uncomfortable, and that reaction revealed a bigger truth about Hollywood in that era. The industry preferred polished heroes over damaged veterans. Audiences were easier to entertain with confidence, victory, and tough guy speeches than with the emotional reality many soldiers carried home after war. MGM eventually took the Red Badge of Courage away from director John Huston, and that changed everything. The studio cut the movie down heavily, then they cut it again. Quiet moments were removed, emotional scenes disappeared, and a narrator was added to explain things that Huston originally wanted audiences to feel through silence and tension. Some of Audie Murphy's strongest scenes were completely deleted. By the end, the film had been reduced to only 69 minutes, far shorter than Huston's original version. Several scenes praised by early viewers reportedly vanished forever, and the full original cut has never been recovered. When the edited version finally hit theaters, it failed financially, and this became the painful irony. Hollywood took the one deeply honest war film Murphy ever made, chopped it apart, released a weakened version, then blamed audiences when it underperformed, but audiences never got to see the real movie in the first place. Murphy reportedly carried frustration about that for years. He later told friends that The Red Badge of Courage was the only film he truly felt proud of, yet he disliked watching the released version because it no longer reflected what they had created during filming. The studio had reshaped it into something safer and easier to market. If people watch the 1951 release today, they are only seeing the version Hollywood allowed the public to see, not the full emotional performance Murphy originally gave. And that idea connects directly to why his feelings toward John Wayne became so complicated. At the same time studios were hiding or softening realistic portrayals of soldiers, John Wayne's war movies received huge promotion, national advertising, and packed audiences across America. The polished movie hero was celebrated everywhere. Meanwhile, the raw and more uncomfortable version of war kept getting pushed aside. The actor playing soldiers became a bigger star, while the real soldier kept getting pushed aside. And Audie Murphy noticed it the entire time. Most people only remember how Murphy's story ended, the plane crash and the burial at Arlington. But the difficult years in between are rarely talked about. After The Red Badge of Courage failed financially, Hollywood quietly decided Murphy was not leading man material. Studios pushed him back into low-budget westerns and routine roles that many believed were far below his abilities. Still, he kept working because he had a family to support and needed steady income. Then came To Hell and Back in 1955. The film told the story of Murphy's own wartime experiences, and Murphy played himself. That meant recreating some of the most traumatic moments of his life in front of cameras. Scenes based on real combat, real fear, real deaths. Instead of bullets, there were lights and microphones, but the memories were still there. The movie became a massive success. At the time, it was Universal Pictures' highest-grossing film ever and held that record for nearly 20 years until Jaws passed it in 1975. But Murphy reportedly hated making it. He later told friends the experience left him emotionally drained. Replaying his own war experiences for entertainment felt disturbing to him, almost like reliving pieces of his life over and over again. And despite the movie making huge profits,
top picture out of.
Yeah.
But something, regardless of whether it was a top picture or not, there would be something in it worthwhile going to see if Jack Ford directed it, because he had that particular talent.
Murphy was paid a flat salary instead of receiving a percentage of the earnings. The studio became richer than ever. Murphy just received another paycheck. That pattern followed him for years. Hollywood welcomed his pain when it could be packaged into movies, posters, and ticket sales. But once the cameras stopped rolling, many people looked away from the struggles underneath. By the late 1950s, Murphy was also facing serious financial trouble. He lost money gambling, buying racehorses, and investing in risky business deals involving cattle and oil. Lawsuits piled up, tax problems followed. The IRS eventually came after him. Some mistakes were his own decisions, but some were tied to deeper struggles nobody fully understood at the time. Murphy dealt with severe insomnia and symptoms now widely recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder. To sleep even a few hours, he became heavily dependent on prescription sleeping pills. When Audie Murphy tried quitting sleeping pills, the nightmares reportedly came back so intensely that he could barely function. At one point during the 1960s, he locked himself inside a hotel room for several days and stopped taking the pills completely. When he finally came out, he looked exhausted and shaken, but he had managed to quit. He rarely spoke publicly about that experience afterward. What he did speak about was something almost nobody in Hollywood wanted to discuss at the time: the mental toll of war. Murphy began openly talking about combat fatigue and the struggles veterans faced after returning home. In interviews, he criticized the U.S. government for neglecting former soldiers once the celebrations ended. He argued that veterans were praised during wartime, but often forgotten only a few years later. He also spoke directly about problems inside the Veterans Administration, saying many veterans were not getting proper care or support. Long before PTSD became widely discussed, Murphy was already pushing for mental health treatment for combat veterans instead of empty ceremonies and patriotic speeches, and he was speaking from personal experience. Near the end of his life, Murphy admitted he still kept a loaded German pistol from the war beside him while sleeping. In another interview, he described nights spent sitting silently by the window with the gun nearby, unable to fully relax even years after combat ended. This was the same man Hollywood often reduced to low-budget Western roles. Then came 1968, the year that really exposed the difference between Audie Murphy and John Wayne. By that point, Murphy was 43 years old, struggling financially and dealing with major health and emotional problems. His bankruptcy case was public. The IRS was pursuing unpaid taxes. His acting career had nearly collapsed, and he was taking small television appearances and minor roles just to keep earning money. Doctors reportedly warned that his hands shook badly enough to affect his shooting accuracy, making it difficult for him to continue in Western films. The genre that once kept him employed was slowly moving on without him. Yet even during those struggles, Murphy continued visiting veterans' hospitals and supporting former soldiers however he could. He sometimes paid travel costs himself to attend funerals for men he had served beside during the war. Even when he could barely afford it, even during his hardest years, Audie Murphy kept speaking publicly about combat fatigue and the struggles veterans faced after war. He warned that many former soldiers were being ignored by the very country they fought for. At the exact same time,
So we had a home. He asked us, he said, kids, do y'all like your home? We said, oh, yeah, And he said, well, I told you that I was going to the Army, and if I came back, I'd buy a home, and you'd have a home. That, of course, tickled us to death. He just uplifted our family. He took care of us. For somebody raised poor and meek and mild, he never did lose sight of the good things that happened to us.
John Wayne was working on something completely different across the country, The Green Berets. Released in 1968, it became the first major Hollywood movie focused on the Vietnam War while the conflict was still happening. Wayne directed the film and starred in it, strongly supporting America's involvement in Vietnam. He believed in the war deeply and wanted the movie to reflect that message clearly. To make the film, Wayne reportedly contacted President Lyndon Johnson directly and requested government support. The Pentagon agreed to help. Production received access to military bases, helicopters, weapons, uniforms, vehicles, and military personnel for filming, but there was also a condition attached. Government officials were allowed to review the script and request changes before production moved forward. Several scenes were reportedly rewritten after Pentagon feedback. That part is well documented in historical records and reporting from the time. When the Green Berets arrived in theaters during the summer of 1968, America was already deeply divided over Vietnam. Real soldiers were dying overseas, and military casualties were returning home daily. At the same moment those realities were unfolding, audiences watched John Wayne on giant screens presenting a patriotic and optimistic version of the war, and that contrast mattered. While Wayne was making a government-supported war film with major studio backing, Audie Murphy was struggling financially and publicly, urging America to take better care of veterans suffering long after combat ended. One man represented the heroic image of war Hollywood preferred to show. The other kept talking about the painful aftermath many people wanted to avoid discussing. While the Green Berets was filming, Audie Murphy was living a completely different reality. He was still attending funerals for fellow veterans and Medal of Honor recipients, sometimes paying travel costs himself, even while struggling financially. At the same time, John Wayne was filming dramatic military scenes with helicopters and government support. Murphy was reportedly spending sleepless nights sitting alone with a loaded pistol nearby, still battling memories from the war years earlier. One man carried the long-term damage war had left behind. The other continued representing the heroic image of war that Hollywood and much of America preferred to celebrate. And the difficult truth is that both men genuinely believed in what they were doing. Wayne believed America's military efforts were justified. Murphy believed veterans were being forgotten once the fighting ended. Neither man saw himself as pretending, but the country responded very differently to each of them. Audiences supported the Green Berets. John Wayne remained one of America's biggest stars, won an Oscar for True Grit in 1969, and later received a Congressional Gold Medal after his death. Murphy's story ended far more quietly. In 1971, he died in a plane crash in Virginia while traveling for a business meeting tied to financial problems he was trying to solve. Reports later showed the flight encountered heavy fog, and the pilot may not have had the level of experience the conditions required. Everyone on board was killed instantly. Murphy was only 46 years old.
The bad things that happened to us, he wanted to make them better. He was just a good, all-around good old country boy, and that makes me proud. This is my favorite picture of him right here. Looks like a kid, doesn't he? I never will forget when I ran over to hug him. I said, "Thank you, God, he's home."
He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery beneath a standard military headstone like thousands of other veterans. His family reportedly faced financial strain after his death. Then, in 1980, Congress honored John Wayne with a special gold medal. Same country, two famous men connected to war, very different endings. And this brings the story back to the question that followed Murphy for years, his feelings toward John Wayne. People close to Murphy claimed the resentment was real. Others in Hollywood who knew both men said the same thing, but it was not simple jealousy or a desire for fame. Murphy reportedly said more than once that he never wanted the kind of celebrity life Wayne had built. Audie Murphy never really wanted to be a Hollywood star. He tried that life, and by many accounts he hated it. What bothered him was not simply John Wayne as a person, it was what Wayne represented to America. Murphy had survived real combat, earned the Medal of Honor, and carried emotional scars for the rest of his life. Yet he watched the country celebrate fictional versions of war far more comfortably than the real experiences veterans lived through afterward. That contrast stayed with him. He reportedly felt frustrated that America could loudly praise military heroes in movies, while many real veterans struggled to get proper support, medical care, or even basic understanding once they returned home. To Murphy, the easier version of war kept winning over the harder truth. And John Wayne became the face of that easier version. Murphy did not seem to hate Wayne for being successful. In fact, Wayne was extremely good at what he did. He understood how to play strength, confidence, and patriotism in a way audiences connected with instantly. Over time, though, even Wayne seemed trapped inside that image. By the 1960s, despite serious health issues including losing a lung to cancer in 1964, Wayne still kept playing powerful, fearless characters on screen. The image had become larger than the man himself, and America kept buying into it. In 1962, John Wayne and director John Ford released The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. one of the most famous westerns ever made. Near the end of the film comes a line that became legendary in American cinema. After discovering the truth behind a famous hero story, a reporter decides not to publish it and says, "When the legend becomes fact, print the legend." That line captured something much bigger than the movie itself, because in many ways, Audie Murphy and John Wayne represented two sides of that exact idea. Wayne became the legend America preferred to celebrate. Murphy represented the more painful reality underneath it, and for much of the country, the legend simply felt easier to live with. Audie Murphy died in a plane crash on a mountain in Virginia. John Wayne died years later in a hospital surrounded by family. One man received a standard military headstone. The other received an airport, a bronze statue.
That's the only answer I can give you. I assure you, I've seen these pictures where they're trying to put the cowboys on the couch, but once you make a picture, of our legendary cowboy, the American public and the world public want to see it.
And a congressional gold medal calling him American. That difference did not happen overnight. It happened slowly, year after year, movie after movie, until the image became bigger than the reality. So here's the question that still divides people today. Was John Wayne a fraud? Or was he the symbol America needed because the real cost of war was too painful to face directly? And what about Audie Murphy? Was he overlooked unfairly, or was he the kind of hero society quietly thanks and then slowly forgets once the parades end? There may never be a perfect answer. But the contrast between those two men still says a lot about America, Hollywood, and the way people remember war. If you visit Arlington Cemetery today and find Section 46, Audie Murphy's grave is simple and easy to miss. No giant attraction, no massive display, just a white military headstone beside countless others. Quiet, plain, human. Then compare that to John Wayne Airport in California, where visitors see the giant bronze statue, the cowboy hat, the larger-than-life image people still recognize instantly. Both men were real, but they represented two very different versions of heroism. One became the legend, the other carried the reality, and maybe the country is still deciding which one matters more. If you made it this far, drop your thoughts in the comments. Was John Wayne the image America wanted, or did Audie Murphy represent the truth people avoided? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if you want more deep stories like this. Your support really helps the channel grow.